So earlier I said that, if we're trying to list off the characteristics of progressivism, which is the topic, one of the second characteristics of progressivism is to remove the barriers to the ease of action of the government.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because I wanted to make a point on that several minutes ago.
Episodes ago?
Yeah, episodes of rants.
How many episodes are we going to have here?
Yeah. So was that a question for me? Or?
Yeah, absolutely.
So Alexis de Tocqueville talked about in his book Democracy in America, which I don't really like that term democracy, but I get his point. It's the people that are in charge. He talked about the proliferation of like guilds, independent groups, churches,
congregations.
Yeah, just people that band together on their own.
Community civic organizations, Kiwanis, now I can't think of any of the Rotary clubs.
Yeah,
that sort of thing.
All those informal groups that they might be kind of work related, right. Like a guild is work related. And all those things, they made this nice, along with the family, with the church, and civic and local government. You had this, it's like this three-dimensional net that protected you from bad ideas from on high. Because we own our own roads. We own our own buildings that we build here. We're not dependent on the government to build this new city hall. And the federal government just kept itself largely just outside influences,
outwardly oriented, yes.
Provide for the common defense, and that's about it. Entered into treaties outside of the U.S., and it seemed to be working pretty good. And what you see through the progressive era, the diminution of those things, like guilds, got replaced with large part with unions, which I think are a communist idea. I think that was a communist influence to get rid of the guilds.
Indeed.
You had a lot of these civic groups, they've kind of petered out because we've allowed ourselves to be entertained to death. And we focus on things other than these informal relationships. In fact, John Allen and I were talking about that. These things like that Committee of 100 that he's involved in that try to spur economic growth in certain areas that would make this a better place to live. That's a great idea. And what you have is now more and more people, because our education system is tuned to this, everyone's always looking to the federal government to provide them with whatever it is that they need. And that we're sacrificing our own freedom for this safety or safer type culture.
I think that's that's true, but I think that that's one of the goals of progressivism is
100%.
is to do away with you'll see this in very outspokenly in the more hardcore, the more radical progressive writings that you might read. Things tend toward hardcore socialism or even communism, where they talk about the dissolution of the nuclear family.
Yeah,
and so an outward attack on that. But also progressivism was probably the third characteristic I would say of progressivism is that they were attacking the people of America for their backwards ideas about individualism and their superstitious ideas about religion, and wanted to replace that with the expert class and and science. And so I think that what we have is, a third key aspect of progressivism that is inherent in the way that school curricula get put together, is inherent in it's hard for people who have grown up in this to think any other way until you start to see outside of the reasoning that has been put in front of us. And so I think that it's another one of those areas, something as benign, what you're talking about is the popular election of senators. There's one other point that I would make about that. And I've really, this has been sort of brought to my mind here recently, listening to a couple of podcasts and doing some reading that I've done here recently that democracy is a very easy sort of way, sort of a structure to control, because the small organized group can take control of the apparatus that helps to form the collective thinking about a thing.
100%. Right? Yep.
And so oligarchs can take over communications platforms. Think Facebook, Twitter, think CBS, NBC, ABC, think CNN, the cable news networks. That these things can be taken over and controlled by somebody who can institute an ideology into that. We've seen that go both ways, actually. We've seen it very left-leaning for many, many years, but then Elon Musk takes over Twitter, and all of a sudden somebody who's a little bit more to the right and more of a free speech advocate takes control. Well, we think that's great when our guy takes control, or somebody that we agree with takes control. But I think that what you and I are probably advocating for is, let's take a step back from all of this and wonder out loud whether it's good for anybody to be able to control things in such a way that their ideology can be put out in front of the masses, and then the masses go into a voting booth and act on that.
Yeah.
So turns out that straight up democracy, so what we're talking about is popular election of senators, turns out to not be such a good thing that can actually be manipulated fairly easily.
Fairly easily. And you said something I want to double down on about the fault, the bad thing with democracy is that a small vocal group can take over and run the larger group. That's
the organized small group can control the disorganized large group.
And that is in any group. A group of like 10 people, there's going to be like some, there's a couple of them in there that have an agenda. It might be a good agenda. Hey, let's just get this over with, or hey, let's build that bookcase. And they're the ones that are going to do most of the work. They're the ones that are going to be doing most of the talking and directing. And then you got the folks. It's just in group dynamics at large. It is,
absolutely.
And it applied to a municipality or a region or a state or a country. That's exactly what the folks that have an agenda to push this progressivism towards something that we're not set up to be. That's what this has been all about. That's what the whole conversation is.
So that brings me, to me, the thing that sort of like wraps up this whole topic is that, and the senators, the popular election of senators is probably the single thing, but there are many, many examples of this. It's the single thing that removed, the founding fathers put a very slow, inefficient, ineffective government in place. Ineffective as in takes them a long time to really do anything. Yeah. The larger the level gets, the higher you get up into the state level, up into the federal level, the harder it becomes to do anything. And turns out that's a pretty good thing for people at the local level, that the federal level can't do much.
Right.
What things like the popular election of senators do is removes that sort of block, that roadblock, or that barrier that has to be cleared in order to effect some new good idea, or to go out and spend a whole bunch of money on a war halfway around the world.
Right.
And so that's I think that the popular election of senators is probably the poster child for removing the overt barriers that the founders put in place in order to slow down the government.
Yeah.
Slow down the progress of government.
Yeah, or alleged progress.
Alleged progress. So, prohibition.
Yeah, 18th Amendment.
The 18th Amendment. I mean, it would keep you from drinking so much, I think.
Yeah.
Would it not? So
so much, it assumes I drink a lot.
Maybe that was a false accusation.
It sounds like a great idea. Mm-hmm. Yeah, not really.
No.
So it's funny because this was a symptom of co-opting religious leaders at the time. There was a whole bunch of religious leaders Father Flager was one who, he was co-opted by this whole progressive agenda. I don't know if he had his own agenda and saw that, hey, I need to do this bad thing because it's better for me, or if it just he believed his own bathwater that he was drinking.
Well, I think it goes back to the do-gooderism that you were talking about before, right? There was a big temperance movement.
Yeah.
And that had its own merits and drawbacks. Right?
It did.
But then it found its way into public policy through prohibition.
It did, and it's funny because it's still one of those things that it's not inherently evil. Anything can be evil, but it's not. And it's funny because it's still looked upon in some circles as like this evil thing, like, oh, I can't believe you do that. And it's what it is. We're a product of our own culture, and our own culture. If that's something that you subscribe to, it's very easy to understand why you would think that, well, we need to make a law. We need to make, and not only do we need a federal constitutional amendment that does this, and all that did was just it really messed things up, and but anyway, it was just a symptom of the religious fervor, that temperance movement, and there were other things. Nothing comes to mind immediately, but that was the most pronounced one. Did it change anything? I don't think it did.
I do think it changed things.
I mean, did it change for their stated purpose?
Oh, no,
Yeah.
absolutely not. But it introduced the notion that the government can meddle in people's private lives, which they have done repeatedly ever since Prohibition. I don't know that this was the first time that the government ever did it, but that was the first time they really did it on a national basis, where they proscribed something in somebody's private life. You may not do this, even though the only victim is you, and that sort of thing. But it hasn't completely gone away either. I mean,
There's still dry counties.
There are still dry counties, and there are still things like licensing for distilleries,
Right.
and that sort of thing. Those are holdovers from Prohibition. Those are we got rid of, so you can drink if you want to, but we're still going to control the production of alcohol. We are still going to control the importation or the exportation of alcohol. We're still going to control the movement of it across state lines. We can also see it in the drug war and things like the listing of drugs, by the feds, as far as, for instance, the cannabis. One of the big talks about marijuana over the past couple of months has been the federal government talking about delisting it, taking it from being a Class 1 drug down to Class 2, I believe. But the question there is, why? Why the, and I would hesitate to say that I'm a hardcore libertarian or anything in all of this, but, the question is, why can the federal government arbitrarily say whether or not you can smoke pot?
This goes back to, remember that earlier thing on that very tight net, an intricate layered net of safety we had through informal associations, and the family and the church.
I love this.
And so you had this 3D matrix net of things that kept us from doing things that were probably not really good for us. And I'm not a big proponent of like, well, we caught Adam smoking marijuana, so we need to now bring him out to the central, community, this public square, and shame him.
Yeah, put him in stocks.
Put me in stocks.
Mm-hmm.
But if in a healthy, vibrant community that's not dysfunctional, those things that are probably not a good idea and lend themselves to a slothful lifestyle, or get yourself into some kind of trouble because you end up drinking too much, between the family, the church, local communities, informal associations, guilds, all those sorts of things protected bad behavior because it was peer pressure. And I'm not talking about overexerted peer pressure. I'm talking about just, hey, I know this guy and he's got a problem. Maybe we should go talk to him about it. Or I saw him down doing this thing. Well, as soon as we let those things, those informal associations, and we diminutize the church, call it just crazy superstition. We ridicule the family. We ridicule the father in all entertainment. Mm-hmm. The father on any sitcom is the biggest boob there is on the program, and anything he says, he's just dumb and he doesn't understand. And that's not biblical in any way, shape, or form. Not that we're perfect, but we have a role to fill. And you could tell the entertainment industry has been chipping away at that stone for decades. And we're feeling the effects of it and have felt it for some time. Well, the culture has rotted from the inside out. And so now I entertain the idea more and more the older I get and the more I see of this. And we'll talk about the fully awakening that I got from the whole COVID experience. Why don't we just legalize everything, all these things? Well, we don't have that structure anymore. So it's going to have to be built up over time before we just say, yeah, heroin, everybody, you can sell heroin, you can sell whatever you want.
Got 2 words for you. San Francisco.
Yeah.
That's
right.
What you're going to see is the open air drug markets, because we don't have those societal structures in place to put the brakes on things anymore.
Yeah, to kind of a damping effect to bad behavior or illicit behavior.
But this is where the progressives come in and say, Adam, what are you worried about?
Yeah,
we got the government to take care of that.
Yeah,
you don't need all. Go live your life. The government will take care of all that stuff for you. We'll take care of your security. We'll take care of. We'll make sure that you can't get a hold of drugs legally that are bad for you. They're going to tell you the government is going to take care of all that for you. And so people, as you said earlier, are trained to look to the government for solutions to the really big problems.
Yeah, and this is where I fully I have been studying this stuff, progressivism, the Constitution, government. I've been a junkie for this for decades and decades. It's just interested me. I'm a nerd on many subjects, but this is one of them. But I counted myself as I don't really see myself as a libertarian because I thought that's just a little too much, and I didn't buy into this where I was fearful of a globalist agenda. I thought it was ridiculous when conservatives, what I thought of as conservative folks, were called neoconservatives, because I thought, that's paleo neoconservative. That just sounds like slander, and it just sounds bad. Well, I have completely, I wouldn't say turn around completely, but I've been awakened to the dangers of a lot of those ideas that quote unquote neoconservatives pushed, like, hey, let's go fight a war over here. Let's go push democracy over there. Neoconservative idea, globalist idea of we need to go everywhere and fix everybody's problems. And we need to go attack that guy because we think he might do something in 50 years. Insert eye roll here if you're listening. And so because of the whole the COVID experience, I've just been completely shaken out of my slumber on that. And there was an interesting, there have been a series of interesting revelations that have come out recently on COVID in particular. On the, and I'm going to be, because this kind of started the ball rolling for me. I thought people that are saying, talking like I'm about ready to, I thought they were nuts before. But what I was really uncomfortable in the beginning of this, I thought, hey, 2 weeks to slow the curve, it's not a big deal. But I was a little nervous because it looked like the way that this was going to be implemented was the government, even the state and local government who licenses people to have businesses, they could exert that control.
Right.
And I was thinking, like, okay, this sounds like it could be a good reason why to do it. But if they apply that anytime that there's another thing, or let's say there's not a thing, let's say they dream up an idea that sounds like, hey, for your good, we need to shut down small businesses. Of course, they didn't shut down big businesses. It's funny how that worked. The government, the people that are purporting to serve us, they can exert that control on anything. And then the more that I saw this go on, the more uneasy I was with that idea of the quarantining, the rules, the restricting of work, the restricting of free association, going to churches, and the more ridiculous it became, to the point now where I'm just waiting for everyone else to notice, like when Anthony Fauci said, President Trump, he said back at COVID, like, we shouldn't be restricting kids from going to school, and now he's saying the same thing that Trump was, but Trump was lampooned for it. Fauci was not. We need to believe the science. The guy made up a lot of the things, and what he said turned out to be just fabrications.
And these are, so to go directly to your point, what that allowed the government to do is pick winners and losers.
Yes.
So they got to say, for instance, you remember this, that essential businesses can stay open.
Right.
If I run a barbershop and that's how I make my living, that's an essential business.
Yeah, to you,
to me, it's an essential business, right? But they were allowed to discount that for people, and then come along and say, you know what, we're going to send you a $1,200 check. We'll make it all right.
That we're paying for now.
That also. But I mean, you know, I always scratch my head about how far does $1,200 go for the average American? You know, it's
especially the family. You remember the ABC stores were listed as essential.
I did.
Yeah.
I do remember that. Yeah.
And that's when I knew, like, okay, this is a farce. And so anyway, let me roll down off of that rant.
You got yourself on a rant. You didn't get me on a rant. I know.
So what happened was, now I'm deeply suspicious of anything, because it wasn't just one guy saying this and we just all happened to listen to it. Everybody was in on it that had any kind of influence. The media was in on it, corporate media anyway. The government was clearly in on it. Local governments were in it. Big business was in on it. The entertainment industry was in on it. Everybody that had any kind of voice or any kind of influence was in on it. And it wasn't like a secret cabal of folks like, okay, what are we going to say? What are we going to say? They just had this common interest, and they were influenced in ways either through money or, you know, we need to do this. Similar, the fervor before the 18th Amendment. The 18th Amendment was passed through a series of votes that finally got up to the states voting for it. So people were behind it, and now we all look back at it and see what a stupid idea this was, because it didn't solve any problem that they were trying to do. It created more problems, and it also created this dysfunction towards anything with alcohol in it that isn't necessarily a bad thing unless you abuse it, but you can abuse cereal. I can eat too much Lucky Charms or go to McDonald's like that guy that did the show Supersize Me.
Supersize Me.
Eyes of a heart attack. So, you know, this excitement, this rush to jump on a bandwagon, I think maybe we might have been influenced by that little group of folks, to draw it back to what you were saying earlier. And what I'm now seeing is just this delight when more and more people are seeing what happened, and they're nodding their heads and they're saying, yeah, that was bad. And the thing that it sticks in my craw a little bit when the folks that were most vocal about, hey, those unvaccinated people like me, if they got to go to the hospital, they can just go ahead and just stay in their homes and die because they're not pitching in for all of us, the rest of us. Well, now they're the ones saying, well, you know, can't we just let bygones be bygones? And like, no, that's not what you told me. So there is a price to be paid for that. And the price is you're not going to be listened to, and you should be put in a corner, and you should willingly go to the corner and just stop talking. So you're not influencing me. You never did, but you should influence fewer folks.
Should have no influence over anybody.
Yeah.
At
maybe
this
your
point.
family.
Yeah. Well,
maybe.
I'm not going to get involved in whether they have an influence over their family. It's I don't want to do that. So I think that we talked about all this, you know, all that stuff that brings it back around to COVID. But I think that if I were to try to put an exclamation point on this, I would say that what happened in COVID to me is the natural outcome of the modern progressive era reaching its what we would call in military terms its culmination point. It has gotten to the point where all of the natural outcomes in their most extreme form took place given the right catalyst, the right event that would cause it to happen.
Yeah.
And I think
everything
that's exactly
was there.
what we saw. It was the perfect storm of all the things we could potentially see in during COVID, the worst case scenario, right? Now, can it never happen again? Oh, heavens no! Some new worst case scenario could come along.
Maybe this bird flu.
It could be. It might not be a pandemic. It might be.
Might not.
What if China invades Taiwan? Yeah. What if?
I think on that note, I think we were given a gift. And I don't know if I told you this before. I know I've said it here when Dusty was sitting in on a podcast. I think we were given a gift similar to the idea of a vaccination where you get injected with a little bit of something bad and it heightens your body's immune system. And that's what it purports to do anyway, because I'm suspicious of all vaccines, by the way. But at any rate, it awakens the immune system, and now you can fight off the big thing. I think we were given a little bit of tyranny. I really do. And there were enough people that were stubborn and obstinate like me, maybe bordering on contentious, that enough folks that were vocal about it and said, I don't like this. And then now everyone's saying, because even if they were ignored, like I was ignored and kind of lampooned in some ways, told I was crazy. But now people see that, hey, nothing happened to those folks. And that those folks kind of started waking up to it. And now everyone else is starting to see, like, hey, that was ridiculous. It was like this drunken fever of craziness. Like, what happened? You wake up the next day. What did we do as a culture? Like, what did we do last night? I think we're starting to see that. And now it's heightened our awareness to where the next time the next big thing comes, maybe the bird flu, because that's rumblings about that. I've got my unvaxxed and overtaxed hat coming in the mail.
Awesome.
I'm going to wear on the podcast next time, as soon as I get it.
So I want to ask you this in a prediction for the future. Adam's prediction for the future. Do you think that the COVID experience was enough for enough people to put the brakes on the sort of government overreach that we've seen in any meaningful way if it comes around again? Or is there already too much power concentrated in the hands of too few that we just can't overcome it?
I think it's not going to happen again, or at least in several generations. I think we've been awakened sufficiently to where we're going to start seeing significant things happen in the near future. I think this next election is going to be incredibly exciting and dynamic. I am super pumped about it.
Good adjectives.
And I'm not there's no eye roll here. I am legitimately excited about this election. I'm excited about what's going to happen after that election, because there are so many things. You can't even keep up with the news these days on all the insane things that are happening. And I think it's going to get worse or maybe not worse, but crazier and crazier, because it's almost like we're watching this movie of I didn't have that on my bingo card, where now the former president might end up in jail over something that's not a federal law, but he was charged as if it was in a state law, but it was a felon. It wasn't a felon; it was a misdemeanor.
Well, there's 32 misdemeanors. So that makes a felony. 34. I'm sorry. Yeah. Well, that reminds us of our. I have to go back into my notes here, but that reminds us of our buddy Woodrow Wilson, who put a presidential candidate, Eugene Debs, in prison.
Yes, that's right.
So it takes us right back to where we started from.
Yeah.
With the prosecution of your political enemies. And I think most people would have the sense that that's just going too far.
It is going too far.
Yeah. But what can we do about it? It was obviously done. And you and I had a whole podcast on that. So it was obviously done. What can we do about it? That's why I asked the question. Do you think that people have we learned our lesson, and will people take action is the question, or will they line up like sheep like they did in COVID.
I don't think they will. Case in point is it's going over in Europe. The anti-farming, the restricting nitrogen, all that sort of thing. The farmers over in Europe, in a lot of the countries over there, they took a stand, and they continued to take that stand for some amount of time. And now all those threats of legislation that would restrict basically food production, which, I mean, now we're getting real when you're talking about, well, we don't need to produce that much food, or like the Idaho farmers on, like, well, you might have your own water source, but you can't use that water source. So at any rate, I think sufficient numbers of folks have awakened to what's going on. They might not to the depths maybe, but they just sense something's wrong, and they see that, hey, there's this crazy agenda that's getting propagated. We don't want that. We want freedom. We don't want this alleged safety, because we see that it wasn't safe at all. So I think enough folks have wakened up.
We talked about that earlier about crazy. The things that slowed down government slowed down the propagation of crazy ideas. Case in point, let's not produce as much food as we can,
right?
As we're capable of. And you can ascribe all kinds of reasons to that. Some of them very dark, and some of them just stupid. But what I would say is that this is another one of those natural outcomes of the modern progressive era, in that stupid ideas have just as clear a path to reality as the good ideas that could, on their own merit, actually work their way through the slow system that was in place prior to the early 20th century.
Right.
And so I think that we find ourselves having to combat that. The genie's already out of the bottle. Now you have to figure out first how to rebottle the genie, and then maybe not get back to what we had before, but to get to something that is more stable with more shock absorbers in place.
More shock absorbers, and it won't be a overnight thing. It's going to have to be like over time, take back that power that was ceded through apathy and out of ignorance. Well, we talked a while. That was a good conversation, and we could probably keep going. In fact, we probably could keep going, but there's another podcast that wants a podcast in this room. So, I don't know if they're out there, but it was a great conversation, Tony. Any closing comments?
Well, you can tell that neither one of us is a fan of progressivism for a lot of reasons. I will say that the 20th century was also full of really good things that happened in our country and in our society, and I never want to lose sight of that when we're griping and complaining like old men about the progressive era and these kids these days.
Like old men.
Like old men.
As if we were old men.
That's of course that's what I meant.
Yeah. Yeah. So great conversation. Appreciate you stepping in and talking progressivism with me. And maybe the title of this episode will be Progress? ? And there we go. So I will write that down. So maybe I'll share that with Abby. I have these ideas, and then I forget to share them with Abby, the intern.
Well, now you've recorded it, so she can look at it and go, "Hey, did you mean what you said?"
Sometimes she doesn't listen to the whole thing.
I can't imagine why.
Yeah, she's a little busy. She has got like 8 jobs. All right, so thanks again for coming out, Tony. Thanks for the conversation. Appreciate your friendship and pitching in and helping us out. Please like and subscribe, share the episode, and petition Dusty through your comments. Like, hey, we want you back, Dusty. I mean, I like Tony, but
Dusty's better.
His image isn't up on Tony's image isn't up. Maybe we ought to get another one.
I'm going to have to elevate my beard game if I'm ever going to get on that.
Dusty has a solid beard game.
Elevate my beard game quite a bit.
So hope you enjoyed it, and we will see you next time on Mishmash Men.